Hello and welcome to video lecture Introduction 2B, the introduction to the activities of the course. We'll start off with one that should be familiar, reading. That is, reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, and if you're in gaming Homer, reading also Lord, the Singer of Tales, and Nash, the Best of the Achaeans. Now, when you're reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, one thing to be aware of is that you're going to be reading towards looking at games, and then of course you'll be playing games towards looking at Homer. So what I'm hoping you're going to be able to do is pick up on various things in the Iliad and the Odyssey that are, let's say, characteristic of the way they tell stories, so that you can then import those into your lab reports on your gaming experiences. And one thing you could do, of course, as you're going through is highlight or take notes on things that seem to you to be particularly noteworthy as a way of looking at how Epic told stories. And I'll be doing some of that kind of pointing to things in the Iliad and the Odyssey in these video lectures as we actually get into the meat of the course. So that's activity number one, doing the reading. Activity number two is just playing the games in ways that are specified in the various modules. That is, for example, one of the first assignments in Club Penguin is to roam around the world, and the same for RuneScape. So what I'm asking you to do is start a session, and it might be fun to get together with other people in the course, and there will be a place provided on the forum for the course to arrange sessions like that. And then also you can try to arrange those sorts of sessions over at the Video Games and Human Values Initiative, where a lot of the course discussion will be taking place as a way of opening out what's going on in the course to the rest of the world. So you set up those sessions, you go and you do the thing that's specified in the module that I'll also talk about in further video lectures, and then an activity that follows on that is coming back and writing it up in a lab report. And this lab report is going to be something you do several times, and each time you'll be reporting on a different sort of gaming experience. But the basic idea is to just report on what you did and what you observed from the framework of the reading that you've done in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and if you're in the credit undergraduate course, Gaming Homer, in Lord and Nash as well. And the idea is to report on that gaming session as if it were something that a bard had sung to you. Now, this will seem strange at first, I'm sure, but as you go through more and more of these lab reports, I think it will become second nature, both to think of your gaming session as a kind of epic storytelling. I know, because that's what I do when I play a lot of games, and then to write that up with reference, and this is very important, with reference to Homer, and for the Gaming Homer course to Lord and Nash, so that you're, for example, quoting something from the first book of the Odyssey as you talk about something you did in Club Penguin or in RuneScape. So that's activity number two. Activity number three is going to be observing the forums of gamers, and I'll link to several of these forums. You can also find them on your own. You'll find them all over the place, whether on Microsoft's official Xbox site or Bungie's official Halo site. Sometimes we'll be going to forums that are communities of various sorts of gamers, like mature gamers or gay gamers or female gamers, and reading through threads there. It's something that you might want to do to actually join the forum and start a thread, even a thread saying that you're in the course and you're interested in finding out what they have to say about it. But the basic idea is to observe the culture, almost as if you were an anthropologist going to a tropical island, looking at what the people who live on that island are doing. And it would be a very good idea to take notes on the kinds of things that the gamers are doing, and then to write up your lab report based on those notes, and also, again, based on what you've read in Homer, and for the 3-credit course, what you've read in Lord and Nash, as a way of interpreting, a kind of interpretive framework for the observations you're making of the forums. And these activities are, of course, specified in the syllabus for the modules as you come to them, and then the individual modules will, of course, tell you what to do. The next activity I want to talk about is something I mentioned in the materials lecture, that is the interviews. And one activity that leads into the interview is going to be coming up with questions that we want to ask game developers. And that's going to be something we do on the Video Games and Human Values Initiative forum discussion site, and I'll link that both here near this lecture and in the individual modules as we get there. You're going to be contributing to a thread that has to do with that interview, and each time I'm asking you to contribute 3 questions, and there's no right or wrong way to do this assignment. These are just questions that, from the perspective of the course, you're interested in knowing the answers to, about how these game designers view their game design. Ideally, these questions are going to be coming out of your reading of the Iliad and the Odyssey, but they could also be tangential to that, things you just want to know the answer to or see whether the game designers have an answer to. And then after the interview gets conducted, we're going to look at the interview either in a textual form or in video form, and then analyze the interview. And this will be like the lab reports. You'll be looking from a Homeric perspective, from an ancient Bardic perspective, at what the developers said, to see whether, in fact, we can make the sorts of comparisons we'd like to make, or whether we want to change the comparison slightly, see what it is in that interview that seems to ring a Homeric bell, if you will. And then the final activity to talk about is forum discussion. Now, the forum here on Husky CT I want to reserve for, on the one hand, kind of nuts and bolts procedural issues, that is, questions you have about the course, and on the other hand, for arranging game sessions just for the people in the course. But the rest of the discussion for the course I am going to ask take place on the Video Games and Human Values Initiative Ning network, because that is a huge part of the broader project that these courses are a part of. That is starting this new conversation, and that new conversation is based at this site, which is a Ning network, and which I'm asking you to join. And there you'll be able to interact with a lot of interesting people who are interested in games, both academics and non-academics, gamers and non-gamers. This is my usual spiel that you'll find at the top of that page for the VGHVI. There's also a wiki that's linked on that page, and I'm hoping increasingly I can get people to take part in modifying documents on the wiki. I think we tend to think of wikis as being more or less Wikipedia. That is, we have to know something about the subject, or we should know something about the subject before we dig in. But I think wikis have a much broader application than that, and I highly encourage everyone in the course to join in there and have at the various things that are going on. One thing about a wiki is that if you make a change, you never break anything. Everything can always be recovered. That's what the wiki is all about. And I think I've covered the activities. I did want to say something about a couple of the abbreviations that have to do with games. One of them is MMORPG, which is something you'll hear me say a lot. That stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. And then that breaks out into Massively Multiplayer Online. And there are some games that are other kinds of MMOs, and RPG, which stands for role-playing game, and there are many, many RPGs that are not MMORPGs. You'll also hear me sometimes talk about an FPS, which is a first-person shooter, and these are all different kinds of games, and within the list of optional games that you'll find on the syllabus, I've broken it down into various categories. And these are categories that you may become familiar with as we go through, or you may decide that you don't really need to become familiar with the various game genres. But those are what the acronyms stand for, and as we go through, I'll be providing links that provide more information about each of the games that fall into the category, so you don't need to feel intimidated if these are abbreviations that you haven't encountered before. And I think that does it for the activities. I'll talk more about each of them for each of the individual modules as we go through the video lectures for those modules, and also as you read the kind of documentation of the modules on Husky CT here. And until next time, I'll say thanks very much.